Am I talking about Clemson, the segment after talking about Penn State's national championship aspirations by accident? No, of course not. This is not an accident because Penn State's defensive coordinator, Tom Allen, who I think is pretty good as defensive coordinator, is now Clemson's defensive coordinator. Yeah, just, again, in case you forgot those sorts of things, that's what I'm here for, to bring you back up to speed on, oh yeah, he's over there now. Clemson won the ACC a year ago. Didn't have a perfect season. Louisville walked into Clemson and blew them out. I mean, just outplayed them because turns out Jeff Brom's a really good coach. He's got Miller Moss as quarterback now. Louisville's definitely an under-the-radar playoff/ACC title contender, but Clemson is not going to be that. They're the favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel. I don't think that's likely to change, even with Louisville in the fold, with SMU reloading, with Miami loading up again, with Carson Beck at quarterback. Clemson's going to be seen as the favorite. They should be in the ACC. But their national championship potential is arguably, in the eyes and ears and minds of college football fans, greater than Penn State's. I don't know that it should be. Because I like Tom Allen as a defense coordinator, I would rather have Jim Knowles. So if you're talking, Garrett Riley's offense coordinator for Clemson, been up and down. I've got no qualms with Andy Kotelnicki at Penn State. So coordinators, I'm taking Penn State. Head coach, hard to go against Dabo Swinney when the guy you're comparing him to directly is James Franklin. So why don't we call the coaching staff a wash? And you've got a veteran quarterback here in Cade Klubnik. And oh, by the way, you have 81% returning production for the Tigers after an ACC championship season. And yeah, they weren't as good as Clemson or as Texas was last year. Clemson went in there. I felt like Texas was the better team. I thought Texas would win the game. I think Clemson was more competitive than the final score indicated, but still, Texas was the better team. Well, this is the vision that Dabo Swinney's laying out because he's not someone that goes and adds a bunch of players in the transfer portal, because he's someone that wants to do it as old school and with a long build. You know what? That's great. That's you do you. Whatever works. This is the year it has to work. This is the similarity between these two. The difference is I have far more confidence in Dabo Swinney breaking through to the national championship game than I do Penn State. Because I've seen Dabo Swinney not just win 2 national titles, but get there on a couple of other occasions. Now, that was all before the pandemic, which seems like a lifetime ago. It was 5 years ago, which in college football terms is an eternity. We have the NIL and transfer portal world now. That didn't exist before the 2020 season. So, yeah, times have changed, but I look at Clemson and go, wait a minute. He's preaching culture. He's preaching continuity. He's preaching development. And now he's just delivering on all those things? And you're telling me his quarterback is going into his 3rd year starting with the same offensive coordinator and the same head coach? How many programs, major college football or not, can say that? FCS, G5, Power 4, I don't care. How many programs can say we've had the same offensive coordinator and quarterback for the last 3 seasons if you count this upcoming one in 2025? That's a rarity. So I highlight these 2 teams because their veteran quarterbacks, whatever you think of them, are known commodities. You know that you can get a certain level of quarterback play. This is why LSU is appealing as well, because they've got Garrett Nussmeier. The veteran quarterbacks have been succeeding. Last year in the Big Ten, you had Will Howard lead Ohio State to a national championship. The team that won the Big Ten, Oregon, Dylan Gabriel, most experienced player in the history of college football. You look at the college football playoff picture last year in the Final Four. You had Quinn Ewers, veteran at Texas. Will Howard, veteran Ohio State. Penn State, veteran with Drew Aller. And Notre Dame, veteran with Riley Leonard. I don't think that's a coincidence with all the quarterback movement that's been going on. Now the question then becomes, well, what's his receiving corps look like? Hasn't been as big of a problem at Clemson as it has been at Penn State over the last several years. Now, Bryant Wesco Jr. is someone who I think we kind of know what to expect there. In the latter portion of this season, a playoff game, that is, you had a freshman in TJ Moore step up and go for 9 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown against one of the best defenses of the country. Everybody came around to Texas's defense by the playoff last year. I'd been in on them from the start. But anyway, so I look at what they're going to have weapons-wise. Yeah, you lose Phil Maffa. I think Clemson's going to be all right running the football. But Cade Klubnik back there, Receivers, like, I mean, Wesco last year was 17.3 yards a carry. Can they keep the explosive plays going? Can Cade Klubnik avoid turning the football over? If so, this is a Clemson roster. Remember, this is a Clemson team that kind of gives some Michigan vibes. The way that I see that is you have a multi-year starting quarterback who's a former 5-star recruit. Your head coach has been there for a while, and some people think he's kind of goofy or weird or doesn't approach the offseason correctly or any of that sort of stuff. And then you look up and go, wait a minute, they haven't stacked top 5 classes, but they've kind of been in that, 8 to 12 to 15 range for the last several cycles. Michigan's 2023 national championship season was an outlier of sorts from a recruiting standpoint because they didn't stack together a rolling average over 3 years of a top 3 to 5 class, which is what most other people do. I believe Ohio State falls into that camp this past season. Michigan was kind of in the 8 to 12 range consistently, and they developed and they retained a lot of their players, didn't have a mass exodus. You know a guy who entered the portal for Clemson recently? I see these graphics from Hayes Fawcett all the time on Twitter. So-and-so's entering the portal. And sometimes they're worth discussing, and I discuss them on the show. Other times, it's a guy like Tavoy Fagan, who was a 4-star recruit, All-American candidate at safety. He played 9 snaps this past season. Those are the guys, in large part, that are leaving Clemson. You don't have key pieces that are departing. Your quarterback is not leaving, which just happened to the SEC champions, by the way. The Georgia Bulldogs just looked up and went, wait a minute, we don't have our quarterback from last year. Thought he was going to the draft. He's going to Miami? He's doing the Cam Ward thing? Yeah, he's doing the Cam Ward thing. So it's not nothing when you keep these guys around and you have a bunch of players who just won a conference championship and certainly didn't play their best football all the time. But isn't that what building is about? College football used to be, now everybody wants the instant gratification age. College football used to be about building. College football used to be about, hey, let's have a good season and be excited that we went 8-4 because we know that if everybody does their job and improves in the offseason and you keep certain guys around, they go 10-2 next year. And maybe that 10-2 progresses up. That feels like where Clemson is at. After a couple of years of not winning as many games as they used to, all of a sudden they're back to double digits. Now they return an incredibly talented core. And so I think that for Clemson, the other interesting part about it is we're going to know whether Clemson can live up to this sort of potential and get back to the national championship game the way their fan base, and I'm sure NIL donors feel they should. We're going to know pretty early on because they host LSU week 1. That's a don't mess around sort of game, not just on the football field, but for you as college football fans. That's I'm not doing anything else. I'm watching Clemson LSU today. That is a circle game. That is a put it on the calendar and say, hey, I'm not doing anything at this time because someone is going to get a huge, not just step towards the playoff with their resume, they're going to get a huge data point on what the season's going to be. I think there's greater pressure on LSU than Clemson in that game, though Clemson's schedule is far from a cakewalk. They have some key games at home, like SMU or Duke, who's underrated, or Florida State, who I think is going to be improved this year. I hope is going to be improved this year. But here's the real key, and why that LSU game is so big for Clemson if they want to get into the playoff. 2 of their last 3 games are on the road, and they're at Louisville and at South Carolina. They have Furman sandwiched in between. Shout out Kevin Harlan, Furman, and basketball and whatnot. But the first 3 weeks of the season, the last 3 weeks of the season, are going to define whether Clemson can capitalize on this opportunity. Because I definitely look at them as, someone who's resetting a quarterback next year as probably kind of a soft reset team, even if their program continues to be strong and good and they're a borderline ACC title contender in 2026. They, along with Penn State, are 2 teams that have got to be able to make the most of this opportunity. But they go to Georgia Tech in week 3. Do not, absolutely do not. I have highlighted Georgia Tech on this show before. They are a dark horse ACC title contender. Plenty of returning production. Haynes King is back there. For Brent Key, going into his 3rd year starting for the Yellow Jackets, you might have forgotten that, but that's why you listen to or watch this show. So the first 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks of the season, massive for Clemson's national title hopes. But everything lines up so incredibly well for them to go out and get back to the top of the sport, you just got to go out there and do it. But you don't always get those sorts of opportunities. But as spring football continues to roll along, that's what I'm thinking about with Clemson.